given the options, I prefer to learn from success, which I think is a great comeback. And so I guess I was curious in general, what do you think of the Silicon Valley mantra, fail fast, fail often, or as Esther Dyson says, always make new mistakes, as if failure is the crucible of learning? I'm curious if you had any further thoughts on that, and that maybe off-the-cuff comment you made out there.
Well, I mean, there are many that sort of, I mean, I think there's like some entropic basis for this. Like, there are many more ways to fail than to succeed. So you have to explore, I mean, particularly like for a rocket, there's like 1,000 ways a thing can fail and like one way it can work. So you could have a lot of rocket failures to explore all the ways in which it could fail. But I do think that one great thing about Silicon Valley is that failure is not a big stigma. So it's like if you try hard and it doesn't work out, that's okay. Like you can learn from that and do another company, and it's not a big deal. And I think that's really one of the great things about Silicon Valley.
Interesting.
I mean, I think it's like quite painful and difficult, honestly, and it feels terrible. Yeah, I mean, the company is sort of looking to me to rally them, and so I do. But I honestly feel super bad.
It's like a punch in the gut.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember it's almost like a time, like the stages of grief. I remember in Texas, it's kind of like sort of denial, and then it sort of hits us at dinner. It's like, oh my God, what just happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's particularly with rockets. It's just a really like rockets. Space is hard, and rockets tend to fail, unfortunately. Even when you've got like a lot of really smart people working super hard to minimize the probability of failure, it's still there, and it's quite significant. People have asked me like, well, why are rockets especially hard? Part of it is like everything has to work the first time. Like you can't do a recall, you can't patch it. It's like 9 minutes to orbit or it's over. And then you can never test the rocket completely in the environment that it's actually going to experience. So you can't fully recreate something that's moving super fast in a vacuum on the surface of Earth. Like you can only really recreate that in space.
Is that a limit of the simulation tools?
Pardon me?
Is that a limit of the simulation tools today, or is that a fundamental?
Yeah, absolutely. If there's any error between the simulation and reality, and there's always some amount of error, then that can result in a failure. Yep. So it's a really, really tricky one. It's like, in a software analogy, it would be like if you had to write a whole bunch of software modules and you can never run them together, and you couldn't run them on the target computer. Like when you're testing them, you'd have to test them individually and not in the actual computer that they're going to run on.
Gotcha.
Then you put all the modules together, run it for the first time in a completely different or very different computer, and it has to run with no bugs.
That is difficult.
Yeah.
The software analogies to rocket design are deep. The modular reuse. I mean, there's many of these. Like, for those who aren't familiar, it's not like this is an aerospace engineer by traditional training coming, but is in fact radically changing the industry. I think applying a CS perspective to industry after industry. I'm like, how would a computer scientist or a physicist approach the problem, which oftentimes is a solution very unlike the industry incumbents. There's a certain elegance to it, at least from the outside observer like myself.
To build their dreams. They won't all work, obviously, but it's to kind of encourage them not to be afraid to follow that, and if it doesn't work, that you start again. You've had the wrong view about that in this country for many years.
I think that's something you see in Silicon Valley, that there's no fear of failure, but culturally in this part of the world...
True. No, I think there's fear of failure. I certainly have fear of failure,
but it didn't stop you.
No.
But I think it's an inherent thing, though. Like when Irish people have gone away and they've gone all over the world, they might try 3 or 4 ventures before something actually works in the way they want. But in a confined island, the tradition has been, if it goes down, well, that's it's a bad mark against you. That shouldn't be the way. And when I find going through the secondary schools and the colleges of technology and the universities, there's a different attitude, and that's inspired by people like what you do.
I'll touch on fear a little bit because it's one of the things that I've realized is fear is finite, hope is infinite, and I think what's happened in Silicon Valley is that, as Elon said, we are afraid of failure, but it doesn't stop us from trying because we hold on to the hope that we will finally actually succeed, regardless of the 3 failures that happened in those rocket launches. You were hoping that 4th would work. And I think the mentality has to be that failure is actually an option. It is an option. And in other places, failure is not an option. And that we look up to people who actually fail, but they keep going forward.
To where a new venture might actually be. For hundreds of thousands of years, we measure the volume of timber by measuring the height of the tree and the circumference and calculate the volume. In Cork, treematics.
May I jump in here for a sec? Because the anecdote you brought up of wanting to change government policy and inspire the world to have a Mars program, if you will, whether it's Popular Uprising or space programs at the government level, I think it's a fascinating anecdote because, in a sense, what you were saying is I, as an individual, want to start an entity, business or otherwise, that will catalyze change, even beyond the company level or the industry level. And I see a parallel in other initiatives you've taken on, in that if you look at the goal of Tesla under your leadership, it is to usher the transition to all vehicles being electric, not just the cars that currently are produced by Tesla. And with Powerwall and Solar City, arguably the description is one of ushering in a wholesale shift to renewable energy. Many of the solutions required wouldn't be provided by the companies you're starting. And so as I deal in entrepreneurship as a venture capitalist every day, we see this incredible scope of ambition here that is breathtaking. Like change the world, with Steve Jobs and others talk about, in a company, maybe shifting an industry, but we're talking about shifting like the entire zeitgeist of the world in a sense, and maybe eventually other worlds. So my question is, do you start always in your mind with that as a, where's the starting point? Is it, okay, I see this arc of a story, like the Mars example or renewable energy, and then do you pull back to where's the best product to get it unstuck? Like, why isn't this happening? And like, if I solve that problem, then it unlocks value. Like, how does that happen in your mind?
Sure. So, I mean, I should say, like, when we started SpaceX and Tesla, I mean, I really thought the probability of success was very low. I mean, it wasn't like I think, oh, we'll definitely be successful. I thought we'd be like maybe 10% likely.
Well,
yeah. And we came very close to both companies not succeeding in 2008. You know, we'd had 3 failures of the SpaceX rocket, so we were 0 for 3. We had the crazy financial recession, like the Great Recession. The Tesla financing round had fallen apart because like it's pretty hard to raise money for a startup car company if GM and Chrysler are going bankrupt. Like people,
it's partly for the upside.
Yeah, that was a tricky one. You know, unfortunately, at the end of 2008, the 4th launch, that was the last launch we had money for, worked for SpaceX, and then we closed the Tesla financing round, as you know, Christmas Eve 2008. Last hour of the last day that it was possible.
Yeah, and thanks to you. For those who don't know, it's the most extraordinary act of entrepreneurial zeal and commitment I've ever seen, where Elon personally saved Tesla in those hours, like when no one else would write a check. He spoke for it all, and that flipped the mentality from fear to greed, and everyone joined the bandwagon, and everything changed from, you know, divoting into the ground to success. But you were willing to go like net negative personally of his entire net worth, and it's a remarkable story.
Well, thanks for supporting, by the way. That was much appreciated.
Yeah, we were happy to fall right behind in line, but it was all him.
All right, last question. 3 pieces of advice to entrepreneurs. What are your 3 pieces? I'm an entrepreneur, so you can share them with me.
Okay.
How would you advise me?
Well, first of all, I really need to give some thought to, like, how can I provide advice that would be most helpful? And I'm not sure I've given enough thought to that to give you the best possible answer. But I think I think certainly being focused on something that you're confident will have high value to someone else, and just being really rigorous in making that assessment, because people tend to, a natural human tendency is wishful thinking. So a challenge for entrepreneurs is to say, well, what's the difference between really believing in your ideals and sticking to them versus pursuing some unrealistic dream that doesn't actually have merit? And that is a really difficult thing to tell. Can you tell the difference between those two things?
Right.
You know? So you need to be sort of very rigorous in your self-analysis. I think certainly extremely tenacious, and then just work like hell. I mean, you just have to put in, 80 to 100 hour weeks every week.
Gosh.
And
It's
then
a lot of work.
all those things improve the odds of success.
Okay.
I mean, if other people are putting in 40-hour work weeks and you're putting in 100-hour work weeks, then even if you're doing the same thing, you know that in 1 year you will achieve what they achieve. You will achieve in 4 months what it takes them a year to achieve.
Okay. I like your work ethic.
So, all right.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Elon.